the real power behind the throne now at Mississippi State, whether he likes that title or not. Charlie Winfield, the chairman of the Bulldog Initiative, that's Mississippi State's NIL collective here in Starkville. And Charlie, we did an interview together for the podcast a while back. I don't remember exactly when it was, but from that time to now, when you talk to Mississippi State fans about the Bulldog Initiative, about NIL, about what you're doing, what's the biggest difference in the level of reception and the questions they ask for you now to then?
I think the biggest thing that you've seen is more and more of an acceptance and an understanding that NIL is something that we don't have to like, but an understanding that it exists and it is something we have to contend with. And I think the other thing that we're seeing is people are starting to understand that very good things are happening as a result. There's a lot of good deeds that are coming out of these NIL transactions, a lot of positive developments. And I think people more and more are starting to see that, and I think it's resonating with them.
You've had to, go through a change of leadership here at Mississippi State with John Cohen going out, Zach Selman coming in. What's the biggest difference between John and Zach in terms of what they bring to the table with you and what your relationship is with the university under them?
It's obviously I tell people I've known John since I was 14 years old, so I could write a book on John Cohen right now. We could debate how many copies that might sell. But I'll tell you this, Zach Selman has brought a level of energy, a level of excitement. His background is in fundraising, and he comes from Oklahoma. And you've heard me say this, and I think I did maybe before on the podcast when we talked. If you want to find the states that are heavily engaged in NIL, look for the oil wells, look for the oil rigs, and you'll find them, right? And so we got a guy who comes out of one of those oil well countries. And he understands it, he gets it, but he's also very practical. Zach is a very dynamic leader, but he's not an emotional one in the sense he's very analytical, he's always looking 3 moves down the chessboard. And I have been absolutely blown away by the reception that I've gotten from him and the commitment and the level of understanding, quite frankly, that he has. And so I'm really excited to see where things are going to be going.
I think about, people who are on the fence, right? And the first thing that kind of comes in my head, and I'm not trying to paint you in the same light as Jordan Belfort, but there has to be some salesman qualities in what you do, because there are going to be people who are just like, I don't know, or, my wife doesn't really want me to be involved in this, or, there are going to be people who are just straight up, they think that paying players is something it's still illegal to them. They don't understand how it's different. How much of a salesman are you when you have to talk to Mississippi State fans?
I'd like to think I just present the facts, Brian.
That's attorney at law Charlie Winfield talking with us here. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, because I think the facts really do tell the story. One of the things that I've worked very hard to do is to understand what the reality is around the country. Not the rumors, not the things you see on the internet, but what is the reality? And the reality is that NIL is a very real force. And the reality is, even though people like to say, well, A&M tried it and it didn't work, surviving a day of rain is one thing, but surviving weeks and years of rain is quite another. And it's raining pretty hard at some other places. And so I just try to, one, be honest and tell people this exists. The other thing that I try to tell people is we can make a difference in what we're doing. Everybody likes to say, well, we're Mississippi State. We're going to be outspent. We're not going to have as much money. And they're right, but we never have. We've always had the lowest budget. We've always had the lowest attendance. We've always had, we've got all these things that work against us, and we've never allowed that to be an excuse before. So there's no reason to start now to saying that we can't compete because of this. Nobody wants to excuse a coach for going 6-5 because he has the lowest budget in the league. We can't let that be an excuse of why we're not going to engage in NIL. We simply have a choice. We can be involved or we can lose. I had somebody tell me one time they wanted to use the phrase NIL meant not into losing. And I think that's where I am. I'm not into losing.
The process of NIL is kind of a mystery to the average fan. So as much as you can, explain how a deal is kind of struck. in terms of does the coaching staff come to you and say, okay, we are interested in this player, or we want to keep this player out of the portal. We want to keep him from going to the NFL this year. This is what we want to do. And then it's up to you to structure the deal. How much input do the players have in their deals?
Yeah, so primarily, and this may send a shudder of fear down many spines when I say this, but primarily I'm identifying who those players are, and then I'm reaching out proactively to them to talk to them about trying to make a connection with what we're doing. And obviously, much like you, Brian, there aren't many people who know more about Mississippi State sports than you do. I get to be kind of in that similar spot because we're around it, right?
Yeah.
It's not a matter of getting a relationship with coaches. We couldn't avoid them if we wanted, right? We're going to see them every
Zach
day.
Arnett would probably, I'd rather avoid him, but yes, you're correct.
Well, that's what I hear. I already brought the heat.
It was fun. It was fun.
That is Zach Arnett. That's one of the reasons, man. You talk about why do you get up every day and do something? You got guys like Zach Arnett around here, man. It's Chris Jans. It's hard not to be excited about trying to help those guys. And so the way that I try to help is to understand and to have some understanding of, hey, who do we need back? Now, I'll tell you the one thing that we're not doing and we're not ever going to do. Around the country, you're seeing NIL groups that are targeting high school players. That's a fool's game. It is an absolute fool's game. The people that we want to interact with, the people that we want to represent the Bulldog Initiative are the people who have a demonstrated connection to Mississippi State, who have the skill set, who have the personality to represent what we're doing. And we seek them out, and then it's just an individual discussion. And, you try to understand their circumstances. One of my favorite stories, Brian, a lot of people hear all these things going on about NIL, and they think, well, this is just paying players, and it's just buying an extra round of food or that kind of thing, or extra round of drinks, what have you. One of my favorite stories is I had a player in my office who was faced with a dilemma. They could graduate and lose their Pell Grant, or they could find a way to change majors, do something to prevent themselves from graduating so that they could have the financial assistance that they needed to stay in school. We were able to do an NIL arrangement with that player who's going to do some things for us to get them enough funding to make up for their Pell Grant. Those aren't the things that make the front page of SI.com or what have you, because they're not outlandish, but it's a very good thing. And more often than not, that's where we're seeing NIL right now.
This is probably the question you get the most, but do you feel confident as we sit right now about Mississippi State in the NIL era? And do you feel more confident than you did 6 months ago, 12 months ago, as to where you stand right now?
Yes and yes. And there's a few things that go into that. If we were being measured by raw dollars, if we were being measured by how much money can you spend or have you spent, if you like to celebrate money out the door, no, we would be not evaluated kindly. But I tend to look at things another way. I tend to look at how efficient are you in spending your money? How appropriate are you in the connections you make? And I think in that regard, we've been very successful. And I think that we're going to continue to be, because one of the things I know about the staff and the people at Mississippi State, they understand that we've got a good foundation, but now we got to go vertical. We need more steam in the engine. And I sense an energy and a commitment and an alignment across the university, across athletics that we've never seen before. I am absolutely confident and committed.
The Bulldog Initiative, if you want to, real quick, you've got about 30, 40 seconds. If I need to get in contact with you, if somebody's interested in donating, what do they need to do?
Yeah, you can find me at bulldoginitiative.com or C. Winfield at bulldog.ms. I was in Birmingham speaking last night. I was speaking last week. I'll be happy to do it again. If there's a group who wants to talk, I'll be there.